June 26th, 1941. A rutted farm track 3 kilometers east of Brody, Ukraine. Dawn lays a silver sheet over churned earth. The air tastes of oil and wet iron. The German column, elements of a Panzer division, idles under a low, bruised sky. Men in field grey jackets perch on turret hatches, cigarette smoke curling into the diesel fog. You can hear the ratcheting click of turret gears, the soft clunk of shells in magazines, and the nervous chatter of radio operators tuning frequencies that still smell new. Oberfeldwebel Friedrich Lang, thin-faced with grease under his fingernails and a nickname the men use with rough affection, leans on the glacis of his Panzer III and squints across the field. He's seen Russian tanks before, he tells anyone who will listen. Oblong boxes, slow, easy targets. When the scouts point and a shape lumbers into view on the distant rise, the first laugh is a shared, contemptuous sound. "It's ugly," one of the crew says, "like a tractor with a cannon." From the German vantage, the T-34 is almost comical at first. A low, squat hull wrapped in primitive curves, a turret that looks hastily bolted on, paint-scarred and matte with the grime of retreat. The crew, 3 men in a line, faces ringed with frost, seem as surprised by their own machine as the Germans are by its shape. They jab at levers, shout over engines, and the Russian tank moves forward in a ponderous, steady gait that should, by rights, make it an easy kill. But the first impressions are a treacherous thing. As the T-34 comes closer, detail emerges. Armor angled sharply, broad tracks swallowing the mud, a deep, gravelly exhaust note from a diesel engine. The German gunners, trained on the predictable silhouette of the T-26 and BT series, fumble as the target's contours refuse to present a flat face. Lang's loader smacks the side of the turret and mutters something about cheap steel. But their confidence is brittle. Radio traffic is a staccato of orders and disbelief. Find Panzer, gesehen. Tall profile, strange angle. The battalion commander, a compact man with a voice like gravel, barks for firing positions for range. The Panzer III's 50mm cannon is aimed where German gunnery doctrine promises success. Cross the T-34's expected machine, punch through, and have the enemy tank's ammunition detonate in a blossoming flash. The shot cracks. Sharp, metallic, and the shell slams into the T-34's hull with a dull thunk that everyone hears, a sound almost obscene in its ordinariness. Then nothing. The dust rises in a brown cloud and settles. The German crew squints. Where the shell struck, the steel seems to have diverted the blow. The round skittered, left a crescent of scabbed paint, and the T-34, unshaken, pivots its turret. Men who had laughed a heartbeat ago feel the laugh die in their throats. On the Russian side, a signal light blinks, and the loader yells a name, Sergei or Ivan. The syllable is lost in wind, and the 76mm gun answers with a measured roar. The shell is larger than anything the Panzer III expects to receive. It tears through turret armor or through the cradle of equipment, and the Panzer's commander slumps. Lang feels a hot pressure in his chest that is not fear yet, but a physical compression. The strange animal shock of seeing vulnerability in metal you trusted. Outside of that immediate exchange, there are other, quieter surprises that begin to take shape. The T-34's broad tracks bite the churned mud like a beast made for that ground. Where a Panzer IV's narrower tracks will spin and sink, the Soviet tank rolls on as if ground were a mere inconvenience. Men who have watched the plains of Poland and France in summer now look at this scarred, wet landscape and understand that mobility here is not the same problem it was in the West. Back at brigade headquarters, where maps are spread under lamps and the smell of paper and coffee hangs in the cold, intelligence officers begin to trade notes with the private, candid tone of people seeing reality get remixed. Reports arrive, simple, terse, multiple sightings, similar descriptions. The word T-34 circulates, first half joking, then edged with something an officer cannot find the right name for. It's not enough to call it a better tank. It is a different answer to the question of what a tank should be. The crews, meanwhile, tell the story in small human bursts. The moment when a round that would have shattered a turret in 1939 glanced off. The odd diesel smell that betrayed the engine's different music. The way the Soviet crew handled their machine with a calm and brutal efficiency. The laughter changes tone. It becomes sharp, a defensive sound. Men who came to the campaign reciting doctrines now stare at armor diagrams and squint at sketches as if trying to read a foreign language. A German platoon leader pulls a scrap of paper, draws lines, angles, and tries to explain to his NCOS why the shells bounced. Sloped, he says, and they echo the word without understanding the geometry that makes it lethal. The intuitions that guided their victories across Western Europe. Target the side, aim for the engine deck, count on narrow tracks to betray bogging, begin to falter in the mud and the cold. And for a moment, in that grey light east of Brody, the war feels like a pivot. Not because of one crew or one encounter, but because a machine designed with different priorities, survivability, mobility over soft ground, a gun that could punch through older German armor, has shown up and refused to be slotted into existing expectations. The panzer divisions that had moved fast across calm ground now face an adversary that undermines the assumptions of speed, armor, and firepower they had trained under. Friedrich Lang stares at the distant silhouette as it slews away, unbowed, and the word he cannot quite admit yet hangs between his breath and the cold air. Underestimated. June 29th, 1941. 3 days after Brody. The front has moved east, but the memory of that first encounter follows the German divisions like a shadow that won't lift. Radios crackle with static and disbelief. Messages roll through channels faster than field orders can catch up. Unidentified Soviet tank. Armor resistant to 50 millimeters. Gun appears larger than 75 millimeters. Recommend caution. By the time Panzer Group 1 crosses the Bug River, the word T-34 is no longer a rumor. It's a ghost story, whispered in dugouts and repair bays. Crews trade fragments of what they've seen. Tanks that shrug off point-blank hits, that can climb slopes their own machines would flounder on, that keep coming, even when riddled with holes. At a forward refit depot outside Dubno, the mechanics are already improvising. You can smell hot oil, cordite, and the sour stench of burned paint. Welding torches flash as men try bolting extra track links to their turrets for armor. Someone scrawls chalk notes across a dented glacis. T-34. Treffer. Higher, kein Durchschlag. Hit here, no penetration. The words are half warning, half confession. Oberfeldwebel Lang's unit is down to half its strength. One Panzer IV gutted by a direct hit through the driver's vision slit. Another stranded in the mud. Track snapped like a broken rib. The mechanics swear they've never seen a tank that could move so freely through terrain this bad. It's those tracks, one says, tapping ash from a cigarette. They're almost twice as wide as ours. And that armor, angled like a roof. Every shot just skips. Lang listens. He still remembers the dull clang of his own shell, deflecting. Every word confirms what he already knows. The T-34 wasn't an anomaly. It was a system. Further north, reconnaissance units stumble on burned-out German armor. Dozens of vehicles gutted along the road to Minsk. The same pattern appears again and again. Shots that hit but fail to penetrate. Impact marks that make no sense according to training manuals. When these reports reach the headquarters of Army Group Center, General Heinz Guderian himself paws over the sketches, tapping the page with a gloved finger. This, he murmurs, is no peasant's tractor. In Berlin, weeks later, photographs arrive at the Waffenamt, the Army Ordnance Office. They show captured examples of the new Soviet tank, their paint scorched, their interiors still reeking of oil and smoke. German engineers gather around the wrecks like surgeons at an autopsy. They run calipers along the armor, trace the slope of the glacis, and make notes with a kind of grim admiration. One of them, young, bespectacled, too thin for the uniform he wears, writes in the margin of his report, "Sloped armor deflects impact. 45mm plate offers protection equivalent to 70mm. Recommend urgent study." The finding stuns the technical officers. For years, German design had favored vertical armor and intricate engineering. The T-34, by contrast, looks crude, almost unfinished, but it is brilliant in its simplicity. It is fast, easy to produce, and hard to kill. At the front, the human cost grows. German tankers begin to whisper that engaging a T-34 head-on is suicide. Orders change quietly. Avoid direct confrontation. Call for artillery. Lure them into ambushes where terrain can equalize the fight. The myth of the invincible Panzer begins to fracture. One evening near Smolensk, Lang's platoon huddles beside their half-repaired vehicles. The air smells of birch sap and cordite. Someone brews ersatz coffee on a camp stove. The radio hums with reports of another lost battalion, cut down not by sheer numbers, but by something the men had no doctrine for. Lang looks east, where the clouds turn red in the last light. "If they have hundreds of those," he says softly, "this war will be different." No one answers, but everyone hears him. Back in the rear echelons, Hitler himself is shown a report detailing the new Soviet tanks' capabilities. He refuses to believe it at first. How could inferior Slavic industry have produced something superior to German craftsmanship? But the evidence is undeniable. The Führer's rage is cold and specific. Within days, orders go out. Every captured T-34 is to be studied, copied, and counted. The engineers get to work. Not long after, one of them will draw the first outline of a new machine on tracing paper. A tank meant to rival the T-34, borrowing its sloped armor and mobility. Its name will later become legend, the Panther. But in the summer of 1941, none of that exists yet. All that exists are scorched hulls, confused soldiers, and the gnawing realization that the war they thought they understood has changed shape. Somewhere beyond the tree line, another diesel engine growls in the distance. The sound makes the men turn their heads in unison, scanning the horizon with a new kind of silence. The silence that comes not from confidence, but from respect. October 1941. Daimler-Benz Proving Grounds, Stuttgart. The smell of machine oil and cold rain fills the air as German engineers walk in slow circles around a captured T-34. It sits in the hangar like a relic from another world. Its steel still dented from combat, its diesel engine coughing faintly as mechanics coax it to life. Major General Alfred Tommel of the Waffenamt leans against a drafting table, watching the Soviet tank's broad tracks roll effortlessly across a muddy test lane. The demonstration is unnerving. "You see," he says to his aides, "they built it for Russia, not for parades." The Soviet machine churns through wet soil that would bog down a Panzer IV in seconds. It is loud, smoky, and ugly, but it works. Its armor deflects shells. Its gun punches holes clean through German armor. Its suspension shrugs off ruts and ditches. Every officer in the room understands what this means. Germany, once the undisputed master of armored warfare, is now playing catch-up. At the drawing boards, engineers argue deep into the night. Some want to copy the T-34 exactly. Others insist Germany must do better. Stronger armor, higher velocity gun, faster turret traverse. Heated discussions echo through the drafting halls, carried on clouds of cigarette smoke. Someone sketches a turret shaped like a panther's head, and the name sticks. But design is only half the battle. The other half is pride. Germany's engineering corps had always valued precision, tight tolerances, fine machining, elegant mechanisms. The T-34 violates every one of those principles. Its armor plates are welded at rough angles, its optics are crude, its interior cramped, and yet it wins. One designer murmurs what everyone is thinking: it's built to fight a war we didn't prepare for. Meanwhile, in the east, that war rages on. Lang's division is deep in Russia now, rolling through the black mud of autumn. His Panzer's engine whines against the cold, its air filter choked with dust. The crews have adapted their tactics. Shoot from ambush, aim for the T-34's tracks, call in Stukas if possible. The once invincible Panzers now fight cautiously, like predators who have learned fear. Lang keeps a small notebook wedged near the radio set. In it, he writes crude sketches, angles, hit marks, measurements guessed from wrecks they've encountered. Each drawing is a small act of understanding, a way to decode the machine that changed the war. He notes where shells ricochet, how the glacis resists impact, how the turret ring is exposed from certain angles. His loader jokes that Lang will become a tank designer after the war. Lang doesn't laugh. He only says, someone must learn why we keep dying. By early 1942, the first prototypes of Germany's new answer begin to take shape. The VK 30.02, its form unmistakably inspired by the T-34, rolls out for trials. Sloped armor, wide tracks, a high-velocity 75mm gun. It is faster, heavier, more complex. Its shape is a mirror image of the shock the Germans received a year earlier. When Hitler visits the testing ground, his boots crunch through wet gravel as he circles the prototype. This, he says, running his hand along the angled armor, is what will restore German superiority. The engineers nod, though some know the truth. It's not restoration, it's imitation. The design evolves rapidly, refined through urgency and fear. The result, by 1943, is the Panther. Sleek, deadly, and over-engineered, it embodies both genius and desperation. But its DNA, its soul, is Soviet. Without the T-34, it would never have existed. Back on the front, word spreads of a new tank being built in Germany. Lang hears rumors of thicker armor, faster guns, better engines, but he's seen enough to know that machines alone don't win wars. The Soviets have something the Germans cannot replicate: mass production. For every Panther that rolls off an assembly line, 10 T-34s emerge from the east, raw and ready for battle. By winter, as snow buries the steppe, Lang's crew digs in beside a burned-out village. They've learned to listen for the T-34's diesel growl long before they see it. Sometimes the sound fades before reaching them. Sometimes it doesn't. In one letter home, never sent, Lang writes, "They say we laughed at them once." I don't remember laughing. I remember the sound of our shells bouncing away. When the Panther finally arrives at the front in 1943, the cycle of innovation comes full circle. German crews marvel at its power, its speed, its armor. But in quiet moments, older tankers like Lang recognize what they're driving, not a product of German arrogance, but of Russian necessity. A machine born from the moment their laughter died on the plains near Brody, because the T-34 didn't just crush the Panzer lines, it shattered the illusion of invincibility. And in doing so, it forced the entire German war machine to rebuild itself from fear. July 5th, 1943. Dawn at Kursk, Russia. The air vibrates with the weight of history. 1,000 engines rumble like thunder beneath the flat horizon. The sound so deep, it feels as if the earth itself is exhaling. Across the open fields, rows of newly minted German Panthers sit nose to nose with destiny. Their angular armor glints under the pale sun. Their crews tense, silent, and sweating in the heavy smell of gasoline and anticipation. Among them, Oberfeldwebel Friedrich Lang checks the seals on his headset and wipes condensation from the gun sight. It's been 2 years since Brody. 2 years since the laughter died. He now sits inside the answer to the T-34, the product of all those sleepless engineers in Stuttgart and Kassel, a machine he'd once only heard whispers about. "Panther ready?" comes the call over the radio net. Lang echoes the words, voice steady, though his stomach twists. They've trained for this moment, the largest armored clash in history. Operation Citadel, the German attempt to pinch off the Kursk salient and reclaim the initiative on the Eastern Front. The plan is bold, almost desperate. Nearly 3,000 German tanks, Panthers, Tigers, and Panzers, rolling against some 5,000 Soviet machines. The steppe stretches ahead, green and endless, the morning mist hanging low over minefields that glitter faintly under dew. When the order comes, "Forwards!" the horizon erupts. The Panthers lurch forward, engines howling in unison. Lang's machine grinds through mud and smoke, its suspension absorbing every jolt with mechanical grace. The first shots echo in the distance, long, flat cracks from Soviet 76mm guns. The air fills with traces, dust, and the acrid tang of burning fuel. Lang's gunner, Schulze, spots a shape emerging through the haze. "T-34s, 3 o'clock. The periscope catches their forms, low, fast, moving in formation like wolves. Even now, after 2 years, the sight of them ignites a pulse of fear and respect in every German crewman. "Range 800, Lang says, a P-round. "Fire," the Panther's 75mm KWK 42 cannon booms. The recoil rocks the entire hull. Through the smoke, one T-34 blossoms into a column of black flame. The rest scatter, slipping behind a ridge. The new gun works, its velocity so high that the shell pierces clean through armor that once seemed invulnerable. For a fleeting moment, Lang feels the old pride return. The balance at last seems restored. But then the battlefield begins to answer back. The Soviet guns are everywhere, hidden in trenches, behind berms, tucked into the folds of the land. The Germans have walked into a killing field layered with mines, artillery, and the cold precision of Soviet defense. A Panther to Lang's left takes a mine beneath its track. The explosion lifts it sideways, smoke spewing from its open hatches. Another is struck through the side by an anti-tank gun, the shell tearing through the hull and out the other side. Lang hears the crew screaming before the sound is cut off. He clenches his jaw, steadying his voice. "Keep moving. Don't stop." The irony is cruel. The Germans had copied the T-34's brilliance, but not its simplicity. The Panther is powerful but temperamental. Its transmission seizes under strain. Its engine overheats. Many of the brand new tanks break down before even reaching the front line. In the mud and heat of Kursk, perfection becomes a liability. By midday, smoke rolls across the plain like weather. Burned-out wrecks of both nations' tanks litter the field, each one a monument to the terrible symmetry of innovation and destruction. Somewhere ahead, Lang's tank crests a ridge and halts. Through the gun sight, he sees them. Dozens of T-34s advancing from the tree line, silhouettes black against the sun. Their armor flashes with impacts that don't stop them. Their tracks chew the soil with the same relentless rhythm he remembers from Brody. He exhales slowly. "They're still coming," Schulze says. Lang nods. "They always do." He gives the order to fire. The Panther's gun roars again and again until the barrel glows faintly red. Around them, the battle dissolves into chaos. Diesel smoke, static-filled radios, and the smell of scorched rubber. For all the power of the new German machines, the Soviets have mastered something more enduring: quantity, resilience, and unity of purpose. For every T-34 that burns, 2 more seem to rise from the haze. By dusk, the German assault begins to falter. The Panther line thins, the advance stalls, and Soviet counterattacks ripple across the fields with unbroken momentum. When the order to withdraw finally comes, it carries the hollow weight of inevitability. Lang's crew reverses through smoke, their tracks grinding over wreckage, both German and Russian. That night, beneath a sky flickering with artillery flashes, Lang sits on the hull of his Panther and looks toward the east. In the darkness, the glow of burning tanks marks the horizon in a jagged line. He remembers 1941. The laughter, the arrogance, the certainty. He remembers the first T-34 he saw, black against the rising sun, and he realizes now what the German army had never truly understood. The T-34 was never just a machine, it was a statement of endurance. It had outlasted them in the mud, in the cold, in the factories, and now here, in the very heart of the war's largest battle, it was proving that no amount of engineering genius could erase the brutal advantage of purpose and adaptation. Lang exhales, the smoke from his cigarette rising into the gunmetal sky. He whispers almost to himself, "We built the Panther to defeat the T-34, but maybe the T-34 built us." The words vanish into the night as the front shifts once again, eastward, ever eastward, toward the slow, grinding end of the war that began with laughter on a Ukrainian field.